How well do you remember January 10th? For many of you in our community, if you're a real one, in other words, you remember, that was the day they played the national championship game. That's Alabama versus Georgia. So I remember watching Georgia pull off a historical win, and it was the first championship in recent memory, and the red and black confetti rained down over Kirby Smart, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, that's what you should remember. Unless you're one of the casual seals who were clapping in disamusement at the high-level mustaches that run the playoff not delivering your precious expansion that all of you had been promised was imminent. And that happened. The audacity to have that happen on the same morning of the national championship game. It was laughable then. It's laughable now. It was laughable to me because I wasn't rooting for it. But forget me for a second. It was laughable, period, because anyone who had spoken to anyone with knowledge of how this whole thing works, this whole playoff expansion thing works, they were laughing because they knew they were going to have to be right back at the table. See, a lot of folks have been wrongly focused on the year 2026 because that's technically when there isn't a format in place. But that's not the deadline, guys. That's never been the deadline. The deadline's right around the corner. They knew this when they broke off the talks in Indianapolis this last January. Well, that brings us to this very afternoon, January, February, March, April, May, June. So essentially a couple of days later. Here we are in early June, and Ross Dellinger of SI today, second reference for Ross on the show tonight, he had a report that was triggered by some things that he was told at the SEC spring meetings down in Destin. I presume that's where this came from. So here's what you need to know. The execs around the college football playoff hope to have a format in place by, wait for it, next summer, a year from now. That same group that couldn't even agree on what to eat for brunch 6 months ago, they're going to have this thing figured out, or at least they hope to, by this time next year, I guess. What's different, you may ask? Why are they expecting a different result this time around? Well, I'm speaking in a very mocking tone, but there are some differences. All this is on SI.com if you want to read it, but if you don't feel like reading it, here's what's going on. They do not need unanimous consent this time around from the College Football Playoff Board, and that is essentially the 10 conference commissioners and Jack Swarbrick, the AD at Notre Dame. They had to unanimously agree this last time around if they wanted to change the playoff format before the contract ran out. So they stood to make $400-something million more per year if they would have gotten it done. Well, they didn't get it done. In the end, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten, the alliance, one of the weakest alliances in the history of the world, they stood in the way of it happening. And then you had angry folks like Greg Sankey from the SEC walk away and say, all right, he kind of looked over his shoulder and said, you'll never get us to the table in the way we were this time again. Well, the reason that sounds so fresh is because it just happened in January. So now you don't have to have unanimous consent anymore. There's also a deadline that's approaching. And that's another very, very key component here. The deadline is not 2026. The deadline is essentially 2024. Why? Because the contract runs out in the 2025 season, and in order to have something in place, you don't get to change things on the fly. You've got to get locations figured out, first and foremost, and keep in mind, this is an expanded playoff. So you don't just have to figure out a couple of semifinal sites and the national championship site. You have to bid these things out if that's the route you're going to go. If that's not the route you're going to go, you got to get the bowls to sign off on how you're going to work locations. They've got this ridiculous concept that they're currently working off of where the first round will be on campus, but then the rest of them are going to be in these lifeless NFL stadiums. And in case you can't tell, I'm not happy about that. But if that's the way it's going to go, that's the way it's going to go. They got to get it figured out regardless. In 2024 is when they really need to have this thing figured out. And also, there's this other pesky little note that shouldn't be overlooked. Television contracts are in a state of flux right now. The Big Ten's about to announce a new one any second. I know I keep saying that. That's the word on the street in our industry, any second. The SEC just did, but you've also got a separate contract, a college football playoff television contract. ESPN, I think in October of 2024, has an exclusive window to negotiate that. But, and this is where I do align with the alliance, some folks, Pac-12, Big Ten, etc., they look at ESPN and they say, hold on, we're not exactly on the best of terms with that conference down south right now. Same conference that has signed exclusivity in terms of their own TV deal with ESPN starting in 2024. Might we want to, in the spirit of the free market, let this thing go to market instead of just letting ESPN bid and then look over their shoulder? Oh, no one else? Okay, I guess it's ours. Let's get Fox in the room. Let's get CBS in the room. Let's get Amazon in the room. Let's get everyone in the room. So at the very least, we make the most money we possibly can, but also maybe we divvy up the inventory a little bit and not let one entity, one network, have a chokehold on it. In that sense, you can count me as a fourth member of the alliance. I'm all for that. The NFL does it the right way there. You don't tune into one network to watch NFL football. You tune into like 5 or 6 of them. Everyone's got a piece of that pie. That is the best for a number of reasons in terms of the way to go about things there. But whatever they're going to get figured out, they have to get figured out pretty quickly. What are the potential snags here? Like 400 of them. But to save you some time, one of the biggest snags is, where is Greg Sankey's head at right now? Where is the SEC's collective attitude at right now? You are not going to do anything worthwhile without them. I know technically you could look back at me and say, we don't need unanimous consent anymore. No, you don't. But you need the SEC. If you want a product worth anything, you need the SEC. You better find out whether they were just bluffing last week when they talked about going down the road of figuring out their own playoff. See how convoluted this gets really quickly? Another thing is the ACC and Jim Phillips, the commissioner over there, you might remember, since it was like yesterday, that they came out and said, we are not rubber stamping any proposal for expansion until we get something in writing pertaining to all of the other myriad issues we have in this sport. NIL, the portal, all the stuff that's out of whack right now that everyone's up in arms about. Jim Phillips said, you're not getting our signature on anything until we get all that figured out. That's another potential snag. I also am strongly led to believe that, unlike last time, I think TV executives will be a lot more directly involved this time around. You may start hearing names that you're not used to hearing. You don't know the name Jimmy Pitaro. Most of you don't. Burt Mangus. You don't know those names. You don't need to know those names. You may start hearing those names a little bit more, because here's the thing we do know about television networks. Before they bid on something, they kind of want to know what they're bidding on. When there are 9 and 10-figure deals going down, which this will be, they kind of want to know what it is they're bidding on. Networks are funny like that. If they're going to plop down a couple of $1 billion, for some odd reason, they want to know what it is they're spending that money on. And those are just 3 of the snags that are potentially in the way. You also have the caveat that, did attitudes change the last time around? You can talk about what needs to happen and a deadline and a line drawn in the sand. Have attitudes changed? If attitudes haven't changed, I really don't know what the future of the sport holds. You can tell I'm not sweating over it because I don't put my faith in the postseason. So my regular season is going to be there. I know on the 3rd Saturday in October, we're going to have college football the way we always have. I don't know what you guys have coming in January. Call me when you figure it out. I'll be there, not with bells on, but I wish you the best of luck. I really do.